Welcome to the National Day edition of ISUC Plaza Series 7, organized by Integrated Sustainability and Urban Creativity Center from Asia Pacific University of Technology and Innovation, APU. I'm your host and as well as the moderator of today's roundtable panel discussion, Stephen Poon. We are here at the broadcast pleased to welcome our online audience who has just joined us from around the regions. In the few moments, I will introduce the panelists for our virtual session. Simultaneously, you can also use our Q&A function to submit your question to our speakers. Good evening to all from these regions and good day to the international audience, the distinguished panels, indeed to our online audience from different parts of the regions. May I say welcome once again to the National Day edition of ISUC Plaza Series 7 for the theme panel discussion of Making SDGs Actionable, What's the Role of TV Branding in the Streaming Age? We have a very diverse panel with different experiences, with also a very diverse expertise. And I'm sure, like me, all of you are looking forward to hearing the views from all of them. Now we have three panelists, excluding me, and I want to make sure that we get to hear from each of them. A quick background of this discussion. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are a set of the 17 goals objective to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all by 2030. They cover areas such as poverty, health, education, climate change, peace, and justice. As a brand, you might wonder how we can align our brand purpose with the SDGs and why it matters. From a business perspective, the valuable insight into how the SDGs link to the action, activities, and lifestyle of their customer. This understanding can help brands to engage with people more effectively around the behaviors that are connected to their products and services and drive positive action in support of the SDGs. Channel new product development in support of the SDGs and engage staff in promoting corporate culture aligned with the 2030 agenda. In this roundtable forum, we will explore some benefits and the step to do so. Before we kick off the session, I would like to bring everybody through the first panel. Everyone agrees that if the world is to build peaceful societies, eradicate poverty, and successfully address climate change by 2030, implementation of the SDG must start moving at a faster pace. Clearly, as a communication technology, television is a powerful medium for imparting information to the public. News, current events, and diverse opinions can all the broadcast cost efficiently to enormous audiences. The upcoming will be presented the power of television and streaming platforms, integrating sustainability into content, raising awareness and education, partnerships and collaborations, promoting sustainable production and consumption, engaging viewers in sustainable actions. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Ms. Niswani Shahar. Joined Ogilvy in 2011 as a group account director and rose out the ranks to be chief executive of Ogilvy Malaysia. Being the youngest chief executive in Malaysian advertising does come with a set of challenges, but what she needs to prove with her business insight as well as foresight. She also delights with her fresh approach to delivering business growth. She was voted unanimously as vice president of the Malaysia 4As, which is Association of Accredited Advertising Agents Malaysia, where she is defining the industry POV, which is point of view, and regulation related to DEI in advertising, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, both in terms of structure, talents, recruitment, and policies, as well as the way brands deliver brand impact too. Niswani works with UN Women and Lead Women. As an advocate of the diversity and inclusiveness, she focuses her energy in helping women thrive as a leader in the workplace. A little highlight here. Niswani is also Women to Watch Campaign Brief Asia 2021. Please welcome Ms. Niswani Shahar.
Assalamualaikum, and thank you so much, Dr. Stephen. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Good afternoon to everyone who is in my time zone and who is tuning in close to home. And if you're not from around here and you're dialing in from abroad, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you may be. It is such an honor to be here. This is a wonderful topic, and Dr. Stephen has really put together a lot of bright, amazing people that I feel humbled to be around with to share our point of view on how TV and connected devices, connected platforms can work together to drive SDGs, right? So what I've put for you today is what I hope to be a tight point of view, which not only covers what would seem like what is key in terms of content when it comes to platforms that broadcast, but also the inner workings, the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, and how we can make sure everything drives sustainable development goals, right? So some of you who may be from Malaysia or who is familiar with Malaysia media may be familiar with TV3, but I guess the way I started this by saying, can Netflix and TV3 save the planet together, is because, you know, whenever in my capacity in my industry, when we talk about media planning and channel planning for our audiences and for our clients, it always feels like broadcast and conventional TV and connected streaming devices and platforms are diametrically apart, right? It's one or the other, and they could never be the same. And in that value and in that line of sight, sometimes it's hard to believe that they come hand in hand, and they are very complementary to one another in driving change, in driving measurable difference and impact to the world. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the data because apart from knowing this already by heart, we all know the unlimited potential and the undisputable reach and impact that both linear TV and video streaming has for all of us around the world, right? It transcends geographical boundaries and cultural differences. As humans, as people, as adults, as children, we could be galvanized by a specific piece of content, and we are all drawn to it, no matter the subject matter, whether it's a documentary, whether it's news, whether it's sports, or just pure entertainment. It draws and it has a magnetic power, right? And both platforms are effective in delivering message and shaping public opinion. I mean, I do this every day in advertising, and I develop content, and I always tell my clients, we need to be so respectful of what we do because we have the power to influence. We have the power to shape culture, what people feel about themselves, their relationship to society, and in today's subject, what is our relationship with myself, my community, and the planet, those around me too. Yeah. And this is not foreign. If you look at what has been done in the past, and this is just a snapshot of what has been going on both TV as well as IoT, Internet of Things, there are already prevalent SDG themed content that is present in media, whether it's about the planet and environmental, whether it's about equality and poverty, whether it's about human deficiencies that we want to improve on. It's there. But in today's day and age, where everything goes back to the investment dollar that I'm putting into every piece of work that I'm doing in this space, when it comes to broadcast, every little dollar that I spend as a producer, as a creator, as a maker, has to not only be effective, it has to be efficient. What tends to happen is the decision makers and the more senior stakeholders are making decisions that tend to try and make it as seamless as possible. Let's derive more savings. Maybe I can use one piece of content that talks about one important subject, and I can just plaster it everywhere. In whatever media possible, I'm going to use the same content to drive the same message and hope it works. But we all need to understand that in today's world, they cannot be cookie cutter replicas of one another because, forget for a while that some of us may be stewards in marketing or maybe very familiar in the subject matter. But as an audience member, as someone that's consuming that media touch point, my mindset, the way I'm receiving messages, and what I intend to do with that message is very different, right? Whether I'm watching it on TV or whether I'm watching it on a streaming platform, yeah? And we need to also understand that sometimes when we make decisions, we're looking at it from an n=1 perspective. This is my perspective staying in Klang Valley, for example, in Kuala Lumpur, where I assume everybody would have a streaming device and they could watch stuff on whatever streaming platforms they're on, and they would get the right message. These two photos that I have for you today happens to be really, really interesting if you're not from Malaysia or even from the city center. So here we are sitting in the middle of town, assuming that everybody has a device and everybody has a phone and we can all watch everything with the power of data. But even in the richest state in Malaysia, we still have rural areas where not everyone has internet connectivity, where in their villages and in their little suburbs, they all have a Pusat internet community, which is an internet community center literally built for whenever they need to have access to streaming or to whatever Internet of Things that they need. So imagine if we were to only be inward looking to say, whatever I do is fine. I'm just going to plaster the same thing on Netflix, on View, on Tonton, whatever the channel may be, and assume everyone gets the same message. That would be rather one-dimensional, right? We have to think about how we can take that same SDG message, any of the goals that we want to put from the SDG goals, and think about how you want to apply it to each media platform, right? So for example, with conventional television, assets such as branded content, shows where it is designed with a message in mind and probably with a brand or an NGO attached to it. Talk shows, because this is a forum and a place where people are more in tune to getting educated and more awareness around subject matters in a more serious, credible light, right? Similarly, panel discussions. Well, we are here today doing ours here, and it's great because it's a learning platform. When we want to get to the masses, sometimes the TV role is so crucial because this is where people are looking for news and current affairs and more education. How can I keep up with the world today, right? Versus streaming platforms where it's a little bit more passive. I am leaning back. I am trying to relax. And at the same time, I'm trying to see what is there that could just keep me entertained in a not so active way. And here, when you think about the kind of media platforms, the content that's right for it, it should be in the form of documentaries, right? Series, movies that I could have at the tip of my hands and I could watch and binge at any time that I want. And some people are already doing it right. And some people are already, making progress in that light. So for example, just to show how this could be different, TV versus streaming platform. On Sky News, there is already a show called The Daily Climate Show, which is a little bit more serious, a little bit more hard-hitting. You literally have a news journal or a reporter there really telling you what is happening in the world today from an environmental perspective. What should we be looking at in different countries when it comes to their goals, or what are the dangers that are out there that we should be aware of? But this may not work in a streaming platform, right? So on Apple TV, they actually created a show called The Year Earth Changed, narrated by David Attenborough. And similar type content, it's again about awareness with regards to environmental hazards and challenges, climate changes and stuff like that, but done in a less serious way, but draws me in through the form of entertainment. Yeah. Similarly, if you look at another reference that I have for you today, same content, but just done in a very different way to fit different platforms. So in India, they have a show that during a news talk segment that was specifically calling out issues and areas, subject matter around air pollution and the relation to health. Like, what would it do? What is happening? And what can we do as a country or as citizens to improve on all of these indexes together? But on the flip side, on Netflix, there's a show called Our Planet. And on this show, it covers the same thing. The areas around what is happening to the world today when it comes to the air quality index. What is the impact to our planet? And for that matter, what can it do to our health? So as you can see, same content, same actions, but because both platforms are so important in their own respect, there are ways that they can both do their part in a big way to drive awareness and actions around the sustainable development goals. Yeah. And again, like I said at the beginning, when I started, making SDG actionable is good, but it's not enough if it's just about the content. Yeah. The entire value chain needs to be sustainable. So it's not just about what I put out for the world to see, but what am I doing at the back end to make sure that I am walking the talk myself as a producer, as a maker, as a media owner? I mean, this for me alone was entirely real, but very, very scary. At any one time, just so you know, whenever we ourselves are producing film content, TV content, when we create sets, for example, this is what it looks like when I'm done shooting. All of that waste leaves such a massive footprint. And that happens on every production, right? So at any one time, every media owner, everyone out there needs to think about how materials, labor, equipment, and travel sometimes doesn't feel like a lot, but we are contributing to what could be inherently damaging in the future. Yeah. What's good to know and what is really assuring is while it's still baby steps today, there are many industry heavyweights who are making an effort to move away from negative habits. Now, it doesn't mean that it's gone altogether and we're going to have a zero carbon footprint tomorrow, but it's a step in the right direction, right? So what we have seen so far and what, if at all, has not been done could be ideas for you are the ways in which media owners and producers, production houses, are practicing green practices on set. Whether you are now utilizing LED technology to save on electric usage, set lightings to be more energy efficient. You saw just now that picture and how horrible it was to see how the set can just be broken down and discarded into a landfill. Could there be more efforts? And there are some content creators out there making more eco-friendly sets, energy efficient equipment, and responsible waste management. Trailers consume so much energy through their generators, but now slowly but surely, whenever there's a location on set, people and producers are using solar powered trailers, right? Donation programs so that props and set walls could be reused and recycled, sometimes within the same network, sometimes they sell it between each other. And the list goes on and on. But even beyond the production itself, reducing the carbon footprint by promoting digital distribution and minimizing physical media consumption is key. Yeah. And again, like I said, I started my presentation with could Netflix and TV3 work together to save the world? I hand on heart believe it's possible, and it's happening right now. Because as you can see from these guys, they mean what they say, and they're doing their best to make a measurable difference to our green future by committing to the SDGs. They both have their sustainability reports. They both keep us in check with their progress, what they're doing 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in. But like I said, there's only so much that all producers can do. We all need to be complementary with one another to drive the SDG actions, not just from a value chain perspective, but from how we are measuring and putting out content so that we can influence change for the everyday man out there. And while this is something that we can put to a high pedestal for media owners, for production houses, for big networks to be accountable to, I do believe that all of us as individuals are responsible. And at the end of the day, accountability is key. So I tried to keep this as tight as possible. And I thank you all for hearing me out today. I'm going to pass on the floor to Dr. Stephen once again. Thank you all.
It sounded like an enormous task because television has always been a wasteful industry. Making progress often involves travel, like frequently in planes or even cars, enormous power usage, like in the form of like lights, generators, satellite trucks, among many other things, of course, and the heap of waste. Okay, a little sharing here for what I have done, a little research here. Last year, Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union panel reviewed that every single hour of the television produced creates a 9.2 ton carbon footprint, equivalent to the total annual consumption of the two households. And that's across all genres. The closer to 2030 we get, the more granular the job will become. But time is running out. And the industry is more committed than ever to making net zero happen. This isn't just a to-do list, but it should be part of our DNA. This is the heart of who we are. Thank you, Ms. Niswani Shaha. Coming up, our second panelist, Mr. Chansha Chakrabarti, CEO of Group M Malaysia, is one of the most experienced and respected regional talents of the group and also a council member of the Media Specialists Association, Malaysia, which is MSA, a passionate multi-award winning communication professional with multi-market experience of managing large agencies and team, handling blue chip clients like P&G, Unilever, Nestle, Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, GSK, Ford, Malaysia Airlines, Lufthansa, Amex, to name a few. With close to the 30 years in advertising and media, Chansha has worked extensively across Asia and has about 25-year tenure with WPP, which is a wire and plastic products public limited company, living in Malaysia, India, and Singapore in regional and local leadership roles. Starting his media journey in 1995 with WPP India, he moved to the Levant in 1999 before joining MyShare Malaysia as the GM on Unilever business in 2001. Chansha went on to lead MindShare and Masses in Malaysia before moving back to his home country, India, to helm client leadership for MindShare South Malaysia, while also leading Group M Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. A strong believer and challenges of change is the only constant. Made him move back to the region from the comforts of home to take up the high stakes challenge at MediaCom of setting out of the PNG business in region. He led his team to become the best in class operation, winning the award of best PNG media team for many years in succession. Having satiated his travel but by living on an airplane for a large part of his 6 years in Singapore, he then returned to Malaysia, where he spent 7 very successful years leading MyShare and Masses and building lifelong friendship, this time to lead Group M Malaysia, and since then has been orchestrating it to its next level of growth, stamping its leadership in the market. Chansha topics today focus on advertising and media could be perceived as industries that might have no impact on the carbon emission. WPP, which is the largest marketing communication company, claims that their subsidiary Group M, world largest media buyers, accounts for more than 50% of WPP's total emission through emission from media placement for their clients. In this session, Chansha will share how Group M has taken the lead with their cradle to gate approach in assessing various media channel file life cycle stages as defined by the greenhouse gas GHG protocol. In their gas and the quest to support clients in reducing their own climate footprint and also lead the industry around the unified vision of at net zero. Here we come. Please welcome Mr. Chansha Chakrabarty.
Hello, everyone. Uh, Thank you, Dr. Stephen. That was a really uh, very long introduction of me, and it's making me pretty shy because I think you said a bit too much about my experience and all. It's hardly anything, and then, what I would try to do here is that through this great opportunity that you have shared with me, I would like to share our experience in the SDG space and how we can make a difference to this environment, right? Where for our future generations as well as for the current generation, right? Now, uh, typically this becomes a bit more technical because here we will be talking about more actionable stuff. But of course, thank you, Niz, for setting this up so well from a overall macro content perspective. Now, what we'll do here is share with you how media can play its role, because media is the final delivery point, right, where consumers get all the content and all the advertising and everything, right? So therefore it's a very critical task for us that we do our role well to decarbonize. Now, while sustainability, we all know, has become a very critical topic of discussion across the world, right? But many of you must be wondering, I mean, prior to this session and Nizwani's session, that how media and advertising could be generating a carbon footprint. I mean, it's very easy to think of industries doing that, but how does media generate carbon footprint and how it can be decarbonized? So that's what I will try to share, but in a more simpler way. But before I do that, I would just like to ask, or rather share with you, I mean, which industries do we most associate with when it comes to carbon emission? I mean, the top of mind would be aviation, right? Or energy and auto. These are, I mean, very typically the top three that will come to our mind because we know that these emit a lot of carbon, right? But you would be really surprised to know that globally, the internet, which all of us use, right, on a daily basis, has similar emissions to the aviation industry. And just to give you a simple example of that, an average digital campaign, when I say campaign, it's like advertising campaign on digital, right? And when I say digital, I mean, these days, digital is just a platform, right? Whether it's a television, which is a connected TV, becomes digital, right? Or a streaming platform becomes digital. It's TV still, it's TV content, but in a different digital platform that you're consuming. And same goes for print, same goes for radio, as Spotify and stuff like that, right? So an average digital campaign, which is roughly about 5 million impressions, emit 5.4 tons of carbon emissions. If you remember just now, Dr. Stephen mentioned another example. How much was that, right? So just imagine just one digital campaign is emitting 5.4 tons of carbon emissions. And just to give it more measurable aspect, this basically means it's a return flight from Melbourne to London. Just imagine Melbourne to London, how much a return flight emits carbon is being emitted by just one simple digital campaign of 5 million impressions. So that's how much a media, internet and a media campaign can generate in terms of carbon emission. Yeah. So before we get into this, let's look at it from the aspect of business, media owners and total advertising industry, how we can promote sustainability. However, as you know, at the center of all these businesses, media industry and advertising, we have consumers. And consumers, by consumers, I mean it's us, right? We also are consumers. We are practitioners of various industries, but we are also consumers. So therefore, what are the issues? What are the focus areas of these consumers, right, when it comes to sustainability? So basis that, businesses need to obviously work around it, because that's how the consumers are looking at them, right? So very clearly, we did a small research, and you'll see that health, well-being, and climate. Health, of course, will be the highest priority, because, and especially coming out of COVID, right? So it's become very important for everyone. But if you look at it, well-being and climate has become now one of the top-rated issues for consumers, that consumers care about and most care about. So it's becoming more and more important, and therefore each businesses have to take account of that, and we as media advertising professionals also, we need to do that, right? Similarly, sustainable living is becoming extremely high priority. Yeah, it's becoming a lifestyle priority for people, and we can see that how compared to 3 years ago, it has become much more important now, right? Then sustainable living compared to 3 years ago, 62% of the consumers say that they prioritize sustainable living more compared to 3 years ago. So the awareness is increasing, as Nis mentioned, that through all the content that also is being created, people are becoming more and more aware as well, right? And global warming is not helping, right? Because people are experiencing that as well. Now, consumers are also willing to pay more for a brand or product that is more sustainable than others. In fact, if you look at the younger generation, they are even more conscious than the older generation on those aspects, and they even look at the labels, regarding the sustainability aspect. So I think it's becoming even more critical if you look at consumer habits, how important it's becoming for the business, right? Now, and not just in terms of that, they are also becoming aware in terms of adopting a sustainable lifestyle by practicing recycling, limiting the use of single-use plastics. All these are habits that they are sort of inculcating among themselves. So it's individual responsibility is also happening from that perspective, right? And not just that, even tech ownership. We all know that the world has turned so technology oriented, but everyone is now adopting smart TVs and all. But we are increasingly seeing that there are actions done to reduce e-waste as well, and adopting a more sustainable lifestyle, right? So which is an extremely encouraging perspective from consumer angle, right? And therefore, keeping this in mind, obviously, all organizations have to also move in that direction. And therefore, the increased focus on what we call corporate social responsibility in a broader terms, but even more importantly, environmental and social governance, which is ESG initiatives, which is for every listed company become an absolute compulsory thing to do, right? Because otherwise, in stock market they get impacted, in the shareholder meetings they get impacted. So there are many forces working from all across, right? So consumers on one, ESG on the other, and that's making it extremely critical for the businesses to focus on this aspect, right? Now, from here, I would move to what we as advertising industry should be doing, therefore, because we are also part of the ecosystem, right? And therefore, for advertising industry, who's communicating with the consumers as well as creating content, right? A part of being creating content, change starts with us, right? So therefore, what is needed was a true industry level collaboration from advertisers to media agencies to media suppliers, meaning from broadcasters to digital platforms, like, right? And starting with a clear net zero commitment to be taken. And for that, for starters, what we need to begin with is a measurement framework that allows a consistent language and definition of how carbon is generated in each stage of the supply chain. And this understanding then moves us beyond pure measurement and offsetting and into reduction, right? Without measuring, we won't know where to start with. And in order to move at speed, we need to have a standardized view that can then enable the carbon emissions reduction, which is critically needed. So from a WPP perspective, I think Dr. Stephen mentioned 55% of what WPP as a holding company emits comes from media. So media contributes 55% of the footprint, and that's 7.3 billion, which is petrol car miles equivalent of that. So it's massive. And therefore, it becomes an extremely important aspect for us to drive this from an overall WPP perspective as well, right? Now, our targets have been set, and it's across the industries actually. So by 2025, we are supposed to have net zero for scope 1 and 2. And by 2030, 50% reduction in scope 3 emissions. So obviously, there is no time, right? And then for that, we need to therefore accelerate our media decarbonization. And that's why my first slide said accelerating media decarbonization. Now, the journey will have three aspects of it: measurement, removal, and reduction. It cannot be just one. So it has to be these three. First, we measure, and then we see how we can remove and reduce, right? So that's where it becomes a bit more technical. But what I would like to do here is we'll just try and make it more simpler by showing you through an example, right? So it can be, I think Dr. Stephen mentioned that there are co-components of it, which is cradle to gate, value chain boundaries, right? Top down standardized data inputs across the stages, emission calculation methodology as per the greenhouse gas protocol, right? And then creating a tool so that we can benchmark and then work from there. So these are absolutely critical. However, the emission calculation methodology was developed using the GHG so that we are able to measure it across and in a standardized manner, and not just limited to WPP, but it can be used for across the whole industry. And it would be obviously not just specific to one platform. It means consistent across each of the key media types, where you can see the 11 in total, from television to print to digital, all are taken into account. And the life cycle stages of an ad is taken into account, which briefly Niz also mentioned. So right from raw material cultivation, extraction, to production, to consumer usage and end of life. The only thing that we cannot measure is how consumer is sort of using their individual household carbon emission aspect. So till there we are measuring it, right? So it's therefore it's called the cradle to gate and not cradle to grave, right? So if we were able to control the consumer end of it, then it would have been cradle to grave, right? Now let me try to explain it in a very simple example form, right? So in media, we first estimate and plan, right? Quantify the impact that my campaign will have on carbon emission, then take immediate actions to reduce the carbon emission by either creative adjustment, reducing wastage, placements are higher quality, viewability, and I'll take you through that, and then measure an offset, which is accurately measure the emissions, offset with carbon credits, initiatives, and optimize and then report, right? The calculator, as I mentioned, has 11 media channels, 14 lifestyle stages, 85 plus formulas, and 300 plus data sets. So it's a very comprehensive one, right? Now, it starts from all digital and physical channels and then calculates the various aspects of it. But before all else, there are simple ways to reduce. How do we reduce the emission? So it's pretty simple that we are already actioning. So every second counts when you're creating a content, right? So shorter video are generated generally smaller and have potential to make a very meaningful difference to your carbon footprint. So we must consider shorter ad lengths, shorter communication lengths, where it aligns with our campaign objectives wherever we can, right? Then we compress our assets, the videos, which is optimized for screen resolution. We need not have it extremely high resolution, right? So that will also help reduce the carbon footprint. Then mix up our formats, which is choose display over video wherever it's possible, right? If video is mandatory, then choose shorter lengths. And then file types, render in file types which are more carbon friendly, right? And then things like avoid custom fonts and all, which is again heavier, right? And therefore it generates more carbon footprint. Then remove unnecessary ad tech layers, right? Nowadays, there's a lot of ad tech that is being added, right? So for example, if you take programmatic, many of you would have heard programmatic advertising, right? In an open auction kind of a thing, there are hundreds of buyers competing, and then that leads to a lot of carbon footprint being generated. Rather than moving to programmatic direct, it would massively reduce it. So these are certain practical steps that we can take, right? Optimizing our viewability of attention. Only 15% of ads are not viewable, but still emitting CO2, right? In fact, if you all of you know Meta, Facebook, right? In there are massive amount of viewability issues. So 40% viewability, 60% are not viewing the ads, but it's still emitting your carbon because it's there, right? So optimize for attention by cutting by 63% the carbon emissions. So these are all practical steps that we can do. Then, for example, an original campaign, I can show you the example here, which is like 261 kg it was generating, but we optimized the campaign and it's down to 155 kg, which is 40% improvement, right? And just by weeding out domains with high emissions and low viewability, you can do that, right? So these are all practical steps as media that we can do. And one of the case studies that I'll share is for a QSR brand. QSR means your quick service restaurant like KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, and all these kind of. So that's one of the clients, right? So what we did there was total campaign emissions were reduced by optimizing. So you can see the graph say, right? Just by running 6-second video ads, it was 14 times more efficient than running a 30-second ad. And if it is in line with the task that we have to achieve, we should then prioritize there. Furthermore, the campaign performed better than the benchmark in terms of completed views, and therefore CO2 emissions were further optimized. So you can see through the graph how much it got optimized. It was 63% lower than benchmark estimates, right? Now, creative efficiencies lead to lower than expected share of media emissions, right? As I mentioned, all emphasis on desktop inventory also reported, right? So if you see CO2 emissions by category, media, ad tech, publisher, right? How we optimized it. Usually a media accounts for 80% of the emission, but we optimize it down to 52%, right? a simple exercise, emissions by operating system, right? Mac operating system, Windows is the highest emitting carbon emitting operating system. So focus on iOS, Android, and Mac OS, right? And then that would help you with that. If you, instead of mobile, you focus more on desktop inventory, it'll again help with reducing the carbon footprint. So these are all steps that we have taken to really reduce the carbon footprint, and we actively keep on doing that across. I mean, it's a journey, right? We have not yet perfected it. We are actually, will say that we are in the beginning of that journey yet, right? It's still a long way to go, because there are lots of other media partners who need to sort of adhere to these protocols, so that we can sort of onboard them onto this, right? So therefore, it's not an easy task, but the journey has begun, and by 2030 we are committed to deliver that 50% reduction. So in terms of the real world impact for this particular campaign alone, as I mentioned, it was massive, because this was equivalent of flying 9 passengers from Sydney to Singapore. And how do we arrive at these numbers? Because of the calculation methodology and the benchmark that we created, right? So therefore, it becomes very important to have that starting point. Otherwise, you will only be working in a stratosphere without really being able to make a measurable impact, right? And measurable impact is the most critical one. Now, the future path that we have is we have a consistent framework, right? But the key now is rapid industry collaboration. We are working with industry bodies like AdNet Zero, which is a global alliance of biggest brands and media companies, including us, to drive commitment to net zero throughout the industry, and a push on reducing absolute carbon emissions. From our side, which is Group M and WPP, we have an absolute commitment to deliver our own goals while collaborating towards a common solution with consultation and sharing with all key stakeholders across the industry. But it's extremely critical that it is, for one, science-based quantifiable carbon reduction, and everyone comes together. It cannot be achieved by just one part of the industry trying to do it. So it's extreme, and that's one of the initiatives that AdNet Zero is also taking. I think Dr. Stephen will probably talk more about AdNet Zero, but if I have to summarize to you what AdNet Zero actually stands for, it's basically 5 actions, right? One is obviously reducing emissions from advertising business operation, which partly was mentioned by Niz. Then there is reducing emission from advertising production. Again, Niz mentioned it. Third action is reducing emission from media planning and buying, which I covered just now, right? And action 4 is reducing advertising emissions through awards and from events, because our industry is also doing a lot of events. Many of you would have heard Cannes Festival, right? So much of impact happens there. But for example, this time in 2023, sustainability criteria was introduced into every award entry at Cannes Lions. Yeah, so AdNet Zero therefore is working closely with the Cannes Lions team to help analyze award entries and see how and where the industry is taking steps to be more sustainable. So it's becoming an extremely critical measure as well, right? And then finally, harness advertising's power to support the behavior change. We know that advertising plays an extremely important role in behavior change, right? And that's how various businesses use advertising to sell their products and services, right? So that particular power of advertising needs to be also used actively to support behavior change, right? Through creating content which makes people more aware and make them understand the criticality of this whole initiatives. Yeah, so that's what my portion is. Thank you. Dr. Stephen, over to you.
Right. Advertisers have started prioritizing their media investment with publishers and platforms that are actively decarbonizing their media supply, according to Chansha. But there are many roadblocks, such as buy-in from the industry and measurement. Today, measurement's efforts to decarbonize their media supply has seen key players in the industry launch solutions that they claim have scalable approach to carbon measurement to accurately track, report, and reduce the carbon footprint of all media channels. Thank you, Mr. Chansha Chakrabarti. In furtherance of the topic, let's look at the correlational how Malaysian companies can leverage TV branding to promote SDGs and foster positive change. Malaysian company, including those in the media industry, can leverage TV branding to promote SDG and foster positive change, and also discusses some of the challenges faced by the media industry, which is characterized by the growing digitalization and the increasing popularity of the streaming services, as well as the highlights that the relevance of the TV branding remains valid even when some TV stations have gone bankrupt or face financial challenges. Yes, last but not least, our third panelist, Dr. Dilip Mutun, Professor of Marketing, School of Business, Monash University, Malaysia campus. He is currently Head of Digital Transformation Research Cluster in the school. Dilip has advised various organizations on digital marketing and digital transformation. His research has been published within a range of the publication, both in print and online. He currently sits on the editorial boards of a few journals. Dilip is also a fellow of the Higher Education Academy from UK and also a HRDF certified trainer. He has run workshops and seminars for both public and private sectors clients. His main research interests include digital consumption, social networking, and sustainable marketing. Please welcome to our last speaker of today, Professor Dr. Dilip Mutun.
Hi, a big hello from bright Malaysia to all those tuning in. I won't say afternoon because I know some are having morning or some are in enjoying the afternoon elsewhere. All right, so today my focus will be on how Malaysian companies, including those in the media industry, can leverage TV branding to promote SDG and foster positive change. It is a big honor, and I would like to thank Dr. Stephen for inviting me and sharing the stage with two media giants. So it's a big honor and a bit daunted as well, but I will try my best and share a bit of my research and a bit of theory. Okay, we have heard what the industry is doing, and so I just wanted to share some controversial ideas and some. So let's look at the presentation outline today. So I'll first of all examine the challenging and changing media landscape with a focus on the Malaysian context, and this is characterized by the growing digitalization and the increasing popularity of streaming services. I'll critically examine the importance of sustainability to consumers and specifically how companies and ad campaigns are responding to this. Hopefully, I will conclude with some recommendations for future research and maybe something that the media can take away. So thank you very much. So without further ado, let me start. First of all, I want to start on a very pessimistic note. So this is, a quote from Frederic Cavaza, co-founder of SISC, a French firm which specializes in digital transformation. So TV channels are going to die with their audiences. What they are referring to is that they, overwhelmingly now, and according to Nielsen, TV usage has dropped to below 50%, and older consumers, while older consumers are still watching TV, TV viewership among younger people has dramatically reduced. However, it's not as simple, I mean, I'm not that pessimistic. It won't die, and I want to show that TV is just evolving. Right? It is not. It is also important to note that while traditional TV viewing is declining among the young people, it does not mean that all young people have abandoned TV altogether. As Ms. Nizwani has pointed out, in the rural areas, people do watch TV, and they watch it in a centers, and also with the family, right? So some still enjoy specific shows, sport events, right? So it's not all that. Um, so according to Statista, this is the Malaysian context, 50% of respondents watch TV3. So TV is definitely not that in Malaysia. 34% of respondents watch Astro Awani. This is the latest data, by the way, and I think it's up to, if I'm not mistaken, for a few months in the first quarter of this year. However, when I did an informal survey, by any means, there's no scientific, so I checked with my students. So I asked them how many had watched TV in the last 3 months. Unfortunately, the answer I got was none. Not even a single person, among my students had watched TV in the last 3 months. So what are they watching? So what I found out was that they were watching mostly over their laptops, streaming, Netflix, and over the mobile phones. So traditionally, I would just want to say that it is evolving, as I mentioned earlier. So traditionally, we have linear TV, where watching TV means tuning into a broadcast TV channels using a TV set, and you have antenna, or it may be through satellite or cable connection, and it is quite passive. We are just watching on a fixed schedule set by the TV networks. However, today consumers are different. They are moving to connected TV or over the top. By the way, these two are two different things. Okay, so connected TV is any device which is connected to the internet, which can stream. So this includes even fridges, some even mirrors, which can be converted to TV. So TV is not that; it has just evolved. So we have like over the top platforms, including Netflix, Amazon Prime, and others, right? So consumers, we can say, are saying that I want what I want when I want it. So if they are not free, they will they will come back and watch it some other day or some other hour. Okay, and there is the evolution of social media. Social media is now evolving into OTTs. So what do I mean by that? It's OTT means over the top, over the traditional network providers. So we have YouTube, Facebook, which are which are moving into this arena, which are challenging the traditional TV channels, in the streaming channels, including Amazon. For example, people are surprised when they learn that in YouTube there's a very popular YouTuber called Mr. Beast, and it looks like he makes his video, amateurish and what do you call it, like a homemade videos, but actually he has got a 14 million studio and employs more than 250 staff. That's how big they are. So in the future, we might see Facebook, moving into this arena, TikTok, Instagram TV, right? So even right now we are being streamed over Facebook and YouTube. But what about Spotify and Twitter? They might decide to get into the act as well. So we see the rise of consumer-generated advertising and consumer-generated content, also called as peer-to-peer. And this is something that I was very interested in, and it was the focus of my PhD research. And where at the time it was considered groundbreaking when bloggers like you and me were being started to be approached by by companies to review their products or write about them, and we were seen as a challenge to the traditional media. Companies like like Ogilvy, I don't know, or we can be seen as working together with them. So in fact, people have realized, and a lot of research has shown, that credible influencers are crucial for brand building. A lot of companies acknowledge that today. And this has resulted in disintermediation, whereby companies are directly contacting, the YouTubers, influencers, and over the media companies. But there are also some companies which have emerged, which are specifically focused on social media, and they are taking over the role of the big media agencies for the small and medium industries, those small players. And of course, the traditional, I would say, traditional agencies need to evolve. They need to be aware of this. I'm sure they're aware of it. And what I would like to know is what they are doing. It's not very clear. And I did a bit of research, but I couldn't find a lot of research on this area, which is good. And for me, I was excited, because that means it's an opportunity for us academics to actually work together with media agencies to find out what's being done in this area. So looking at advertising and SDGs, so I did a bit of research and to see how are companies and media agencies responding to this growing call for SDGs. Okay, so yeah, this is a very interesting article by Amy Williams in Edwick. This is in 2022 August. As an advertiser, so what can they do and work with the UN? With the brands, can actually create through research, inspire. They can award generation of creatives, right? So want to do good, the UN has a plan for that. So it's like introducing the UN sustainable goals, talking about it and what advertising agencies can do. All right, so it's very interesting, and I would recommend you to read it. And they talk about redistributing the flow of ad dollars to sustainability minded agencies. So when Chanchal talked about WPP doing their part in reducing we'll say the carbon footprint, that's a good news for people should go to WPP, right? And this is very interesting. And there's another article by Dudek Kula, and this was in Advertising Plus, the marketing website, and they talked about whether the sustainability agenda has trickled down to advertising agencies in Malaysia. So according to Clarence Koh, CEO of Naga DDB Tribal, today's consumers are privy to and concerned about the state of affairs regarding social and environmental issues, and hence take it liking to brands that act responsibly. Marketers should exercise caution when their attempts at achieving sustainability are merely for superficial reasons as opposed to genuine commitment. So being seen as fake can be dangerous. You need to be seen as being genuine, right? So in the Malaysian context, so I just wanted to highlight that consumers are increasingly becoming sustainability aware. I would say aware of what's happening in the world. They are increasingly looking for ethical and sustainable companies. So 67% of Malaysian residents say they prefer brands that are sustainable, and 69% of men, slightly more than women, prefer sustainable brands, which was quite surprising for me. And so sustainable shoppers, which is good news, for those sustainable brands, is that they will be willing to pay more for eco-friendly products, right? So this is actually a good news for those companies which are coming up with sustainable brands. So another study by APAC, by Distillery, and a study in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, they found out that Indonesian consumer 50% and 62% Malaysian consumer, plastic waste was the biggest concern. Slightly different in Singapore. Their biggest concern was sustainable living, and plastic came second. But all of them, 89, not all, majority of them said that they will pay more for brands with a positive social impact, again, in all three countries. So this is I would say, a signal to the industry, to companies as well as to the media industry, right? And why they need to work and towards the UN SDG goals. And I just wanted to highlight some of the interesting case studies. I mean, I had a lot of case studies I went through, and I choose some of the best ones. So the good, the bad, and ugly. But I'll start the reverse with the ugly, right? So a lot of companies have advertising, which are often seen as greenwashing. That means they are not really green, but they advertise as green, and in the end they were found out not to be green. And so you can see uh, one was Ryanair, and this was in 2020. The ASA, which is the Advertising Standard Authority, which is a self-regulatory organization of the advertising industry in the UK, they said there was no enough evidence to support the claim that they have the lowest emissions. They in the advertisement they claimed that they were Europe's lowest emissions, uh, but this was proven to be wrong. And then another one was surprisingly BMW, and it was in 2017. And there's a paid for they use social media for this, not on TV by the way, but for the BMW i3. And in 2017 they claim to have zero emissions. So examining the advertisement again, the ASA rule that this that, that's not true. And so they were asked to take down all these misleading claims. So this can actually have a very bad impact. Consumers are reading the news, and I applaud the advertising industry taking the steps to to get rid of all these misleading claims, so that organizations, they can't just make up these stories, right? And so they are credible in the long run. Okay, so that was the ugly, but the bad, and I put this, it's a UN, it's in linked with UN SDG 8, and during the pandemic, this is the famous golden arches of McDonald's, and they separated it. And according to their Twitter, it's in just to support the call for social distancing. But there was a lot of pushback against that, and in fact their Twitter was flooded with negative, and even Bernie Sanders got into the act and talk about asking the company to actually practice what you preach, because they were trying to show they are being socially responsible, but at the same time they were not giving leave to their workers. So this was seen as hypocritical behavior on the part of the company while exploiting the workers, right? So you got to be seen walking the walk, walking what do you call it, doing what you preach, practice what you preach, right? But then let's look at not all things are negative. So I think Nizwani might be familiar with this as well, because this is the campaign for real beauty. I really admire Dove, part of which is part of Unilever, and they launched this campaign in 2004, and the objective was to build self-confidence in women and young children. This is part of their overall project, which later became the Evolution campaign. And later they recently, I think last year, they had the reverse selfie, which was again, people were talking about it and won a few prizes, which was awarded and I think received an award saying that they are among the top 5 leading cause-related campaigns. So this, they started with educational efforts to boost the self-image of among young girls, and this is a company, instead of just promoting their products, started to talk about the inequalities happening in society, right? And trying to reduce that inequality, right? So which is in line with UN SDG 10 as well as the UN SDG 5, which is focusing explicitly on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, right? So very interesting. All the 8 campaigns, and I'm not going to go through all. I'm running out of time, but yes, just wanted to point out, the top in terms of cost-related ad campaigns, according to the good report, which is produced by I think WARC rankings, and Ogilvy, Havas Group, FCB, BBDO worldwide, and Meccan worldwide were linked as the listed as the top five. Whereas the leading brands again Dove, Sea Shepherd Conservation, Red Cross, Greenpeace, and Change the Ref. There are other companies doing a lot of fantastic things. I'm not going to share all of it here, but just wanted to share some of the winners of the Marquis Award in cost-related ad campaigns. So gold was won by the Ampersand Advisory. The client organization was Ethica, and the brand was Good Day Milk. And they're talking about the Kidpreneur Champions Financial Responsibility, which is again linked to reducing inequality. Then silver was won by FCB South and Visionary Seed with great campaigns as well. Bronze, again, Ampersand Advisory for Alliance Bank. And, the campaign was Who Says a Sequel is Not Good as the Original, talking about supporting Local 2.0. Very, very interesting campaigns. And with this actually is evidence that, local companies and ad agencies are aware about, the SDGs and the need to respond to the consumers' demand for sustainable, ethical products. And I just want to show another example, a case study, and this is Taylor University. Curious Kumar, a very interesting ad which was developed by Taylor's University. I'm not sure whether they work with any agency, and it was a Deepavali social media. And the kid here, Kumar, he asked brave, difficult yet important questions. So the question touched on like sensitive topics in Malaysia, like why certain landlords only rent rooms to non-Indians, a lack of representation of Indian community in Malaysian adverts. Very interesting. So they're trying to show that this, and they're not selling their university directly, but trying to promote the I would say the idea or the values, social values, right? And another one was Colgate Smile Strong campaign. Again, very interesting. And I used this as a case study in my class as well. So Red Fuse, WPP's integrated global team, right? They work with Colgate Palmolive. And this highlights the power of smile in the face of adversity. And it talks about this young boy faced a lot of difficulty in his life. He's got facial some disability. I wouldn't call it disability, some issues, okay? And how he was able to continue to smile, and he's a rapper, right? And I think Nizwani was the CEO when for the WPP Malaysia team. So yeah, it's a very interesting ad. Okay, so recommendations. The rise of consumer-generated advertising, consumer-generated content, P2P represents challenges and opportunities, and traditional agencies need to evolve and respond to these challenges. And to survive, television corporations must undergo significant adaptations to effectively navigate this rapidly evolving landscape. And consumers who are looking up to and supporting companies, brands, and business leaders who are seen as socially responsible. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much. Over to you, Stephen.
In the era of an interconnected global network, effective communication, social media strategy, and marketing campaigns play a crucial role in promoting causes and driving positive change. Developing a strong brand and a visual identity for the SDGs can enhance recognition, evoke emotions, and facilitate a sense of the belonging through TV branding. A cohesive visual language and a consistent messaging across various marketing materials can strengthen the SDGs' impact and increase the public engagement. Thank you, Professor Dr. Dilip Mutun. Okay, let's turn to the open discussion. So welcome back, everybody, all the panelists. Good to see everybody, which is on the same platform now. Thank you and welcome back. And Dilip, I think Twitter has renamed, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
So they call
X.
X. Yeah, they call X. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. I don't know. Can you copyright the word X? Anyway, there's another highly discussable. Am I right? Okay, good. Good to right. Good to be back to see everybody here. Okay, now let's set the scene. Let's set the leeway before we get into the open discussion here. To all panelists, let's talk about YouTube. Now that YouTube is the largest source of reach on connected TV screen, big brands are increasingly seeing the platform as a critical piece of their overall advertising plan. So how are they approaching YouTube as a CTV platform while still using best practices for targeting, creative, and measurement to drive result? I think this is the highly questionable here. Obviously, they seek out the strategies that are working best for their brand. Right, the question for all the panelists: to what extent has the TV really become a marker of people's personality or identities today? Anyone want to go first?
Sure. I think, I think that's a very interesting question. And for me, without getting too academic or professional with the answer, I think the easiest response to whether TV is a marker of people's personalities and identities today is just referring back to my childhood or my teenage years when I was, a prime age of 16, 17, and my entire life revolved around Beverly Hills 90210, the series. And that just tells you little small girl in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, don't know anything about Beverly Hills, don't know anything about America, but suddenly I'm involved in that culture and the landscape I'm familiar with, and everybody's speaking with an American accent. So it's just a little drop, n equals 1, but a little drop of how TV can truly be a marker of how people identify and see the world. And if this was way back when, imagine what it is now.
So I'll add to this. Basically, Dr. Stephen, I wouldn't say it's TV, because TV is just a platform.
Yeah.
It's the content, right?
Right.
Which becomes the marker. So if you see over the years how, like Aniz mentioned, Beverly Hills, right? After that, there was a period when Mexican Spanish dramas became hugely popular. Then Korean dramas became hugely popular, right? So all these across the generations obviously definitely impact a lot in terms of personality markers, but it's primarily the content, not the platform. We call it TV because it used to be ubiquitous at that point in time because it was just TV. Now it's all platforms across, right? Like you mentioned, YouTube, right? YouTube is viewed on mobile or on iPad or any other platform, right? Or CTV now as well. So it's the content which really becomes the personality marker, I would say.
Yeah.
Dilip, what about you?
Yeah, adding to what the two speakers mentioned, I would say from an academic point of view, it's like Chancel said, it's a TV. It's just a mirror, I would say, to the society, and we have different channels. For example, Netflix. If you see, when they advertise, you see that they show that they have content for everybody. Responding to different demographics, different psychographics. So you have documentaries for people who like to watch documentaries, and for people who like 80s, are into 80s. We have got they've got 80s programming. So and it's very interesting how today's generation are being influenced by the past generations as well. So we see a comeback of content which are taken today, but they are taking stuff from the 80s, when we were kids. And I remember it's the stranger things, and where is focus on the 80s. They are based on the 80s, and
Yes.
they had a they had in the show, they go to a mall, the kids go to a mall, and how deeply they researched it. They, in the music store, there was a cut off of a actress which was very popular at the time, the heartthrob. It's called Phoebe Cates. I was so surprised that that the cutout of Phoebe Cates, they actually researched it and put it on there. And kids today are watching it. And they're looking at the hairstyles, the music that we listen to. It's very interesting, and I can see the new generation is being informed, and the identities are being created, subcultures are being created today, based on the past, I would say. And TV does play a big role in that.
Yeah, thanks for reminded me, Dilip. When I was young, I used to do that. Yeah, I really did all this, whatever you just said. Amazing. Okay, panels. Why are the trends on YouTube shifting the way big brands approach the platform?
Probably I can go
Yeah,
first.
go ahead, please.
Yeah,
There's no order here.
because this is my area of interest, and I see YouTube as the next OTT, and it's slowly going to be, and a lot of experts in the past, I have mentioned this, and they didn't agree with me, but as we can see, slowly and steadily, because nobody believed that any normal person like you and me can create content which can be watched by millions. But what we have seen today is that some of the popular YouTubers have got a few million, sometimes amazing number of followers, and which are even watching, and their content. And these people are working, like it's no longer a amateurist video, it's which they upload over the weekend. No, it's they are doing it professionally with a team behind them, and they do big brands see that, they see the numbers. So like I asked my students, who's watching television? Nobody. Who's watching who's reading newspapers? Nobody. And this is quite worrying if you think about it. Who's reading newspapers? Nobody. They do watch and read newspapers over the internet sometimes, but most of the time is over social media. So this is, the big money that used to flow into magazines like last time, it's gone. And you can see that that's the reason why a lot of magazine companies have folded up. And so people are, this is the disintermediation I'm mentioning, where YouTube and other social media channels are shifting the way big brands are looking at how to approach their consumers. Because if you want to target the Z gen, you won't be going to TV anymore, especially in the urban areas.
So if I can add to that again, I would
please.
say, I would again say that it's primarily brands approach any platform consumer out, right? Because they want to target their consumers, right? And then they would reach out to the platform where they can find their consumers the most. Today it's YouTube, tomorrow it could be TikTok, right? So, but like what Professor Dilip mentioned, the benefit that YouTube or a TikTok like platform provides is the user generated content, right? So the engagement levels become very different and not passive like it used to be in the era of television, right? And therefore, because brands can not just reach out to their consumers but also engage with them on these platforms, and therefore it becomes very, very much more important for them.
Yeah, and I think what I can say, just mirroring what the guys say and building on, again, going back to what Chanchol had iterated earlier, the shift to YouTube has forced us as brand builders and advertisers to really start looking at platforms from a content angle than mere advertising, right? So when we start looking at YouTube to draw attention, to garner awareness, it's less about what is the commercial look like and how can we appear in this platform today. So I think those are the things that are starting to change in our conversations as marketers.
How has the independent media looked to YouTube to reach incremental audiences it couldn't reach on traditional TV alone?
I think if I may take this, right? I mean, of course, YouTube now is ubiquitous in terms of reach, right? Earlier it used to be providing incremental audience to traditional media, but now it has become the primary platform, one of the primary platforms, right? But primary reason, again, I'll come back to what I said earlier, is the engagement potential. Traditional TV always was, or traditional media was viewed by appointment, right? So you knew that 8 p.m. is Bulletin Utama, so I will switch it on, right? Whereas on YouTube, you go in to consume content of your choice, right? And therefore, you are sort of leaning in. Yeah, you are there to consume YouTube and not just by appointment. And therefore, obviously, we have to look at those platforms, whether it's YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, in a very different perspective, because consumers are seeking content there, and therefore it becomes more lenient, and therefore you can not just drive communication, but also engage with them on platforms.
Okay. What about other panels? What are your thoughts? Dilip and Rizwani, any thought on that? Which is how
No,
has
very,
independent...
very, yeah, very consistent with Chanchal's perspective. I do believe that, right now, I think YouTube is the port of call, but more and more, there are various other streaming platforms and video platforms that allows Indian media to be able to use it to reach more people that it potentially wouldn't be able to reach. And I think the reach here doesn't necessarily also mean a larger audience. It also means a more targeted audience, right? So when we say reach, I think we just got to be very careful where it doesn't suddenly mean there's an incremental 5x or 3x, illustratively amount of audiences or impressions, but it's the deeper engagement that you can get with the right audience so that it's more effective in terms of engagement, conversion, whatever the KPI may be that we set.
Okay, panels, let's put this forward. How is CTV able to target and engage audiences that are interested in sustainability, and how has it measured success?
Well, for me, and I could start here, I do believe where, again, CTV may have the upper hand a little bit over linear TV is, again, the power of targeting, right? So not only do we, when you connect, when you have a connected TV, the experience allows the platform and me to have a value exchange. I want content that I'm looking for, but it reads into my content to give me what I may enjoy. And I think by doing that, this is a wonderful opportunity for brands or for even the content creators themselves to be able to skew the right kind of causes, the right kind of goals, and the right kind of topics to be able to make a measurable difference for me, so that I'm not just looking at it and just, scrolling away and saying it's not relevant. But this subject matter, whether it's about poverty, whether it's about environment, whether it's about, equal rights for people in the workplace, anything of a sort, the right thing between a David Attenborough content or something about saving the planet, that I think makes the best impact when it comes to CTV in terms of targeting.
Yeah, so just to build on what Nis said, I think data becomes very critical here, and CTV provides you with much more richer data insights, right? Because you are, like Nis said, you can from the data that you get from connected TV households, you can know that which kind of households are watching what kind of content, and basis that you can create your own understanding of the consumer segments, which would be more predisposed towards sustainability, and therefore that kind of messaging or that kind of content, right? Because CTV basically provides you with that addressability aspect of the platform, right? Which linear TV doesn't, because you can say, okay, I feel that these kind of audiences, what we see in the data, are residing in, say, Damansara, Bangsar, or some area of Penang or some area of Johor, and you can therefore specifically target them, number one. Number two, obviously, you are also getting to know what kind of content they are consuming, and therefore you can sort of create content which would be sustainability oriented and communicate to them accordingly. So it can be very sharp targeted, definitely, but it could be different for different segments as well, because it provides you with that opportunity.
Right.
Just to
Okay.
add, I was thinking about that, and actually, I did a bit of research, and I couldn't find any information. That was I was quite surprised actually, and how in Malaysia at least, that means that none of the companies are actually looking at which audiences are interested in sustainability. And but I would definitely say that that's definitely an area of interest, and companies should be researching it, and this would lead to better targeting of the segments that they are interested in. And it could, I would say, measuring would definitely be easier as compared to linear television, because now who is consuming what, because you can measure that, and it goes into the databases, as compared to linear TV, which we are not really aware of who is watching what. I think that would be very interesting to look at, if in the future, as this is definitely a good area for research.
Thank you. Thanks for the advice, Dilip. Okay, let's get to the question for Liswani. The alignment of sustainable practice with creating greater operational efficiency will be vital step forward for decision makers, as ultimately the survivor of the broadcasting industry, for instance, at Netflix and TV3, relies on the sustainability being made an objective from the outset in all activities, both from a commercial and an environmental perspective. So, linear or on demand, which is more sustainable?
Well, firstly, I really like how you had framed that question, because again, we need to emphasize that being sustainable is not just a fad or a trend. It is commercial business sense to be sustainable, right? So I think a lot of people and a lot of companies need to understand that this is a critical way of running business today for us to thrive and be successful. But going back to the question, I really have I've always been thinking a lot about this, and I've had so many discussions with colleagues, with peers, with industry mates, and really it's hard for me to believe that there's one that's more sustainable than the other, whether it's linear or on demand. I believe hand on heart that everyone can be sustainable in the broadcast industry, and it all just goes back to the policies in play, the intention, but more importantly, the actual implementation, right? So, both sides of the coin have been taking a lot of big steps to get to a point where they are actually really walking the talk. So I don't believe it's one or the other. I really feel that they both are very complementary, and they are doing their part, to try and make what we consume and what they make as sustainable as possible.
Great. As the overall trajectory of the video entertainment industry shift increasingly towards IP delivery, service provider will invest in the growth of a distribution model with the potential for a far greater carbon footprint than its predecessor. If the industry is to make VOD, which is video on demand, sustainable, ambitious targets must be set to ensure that the industry actively develops and deploys measures to mitigate and offset the carbon emitted by the OTT, which is Dilip just mentioned earlier on, over the top media service video delivery. So, according to your point, is video sustainable over broadband? How and why?
I think for video to be sustainable over broadband, a lot like what we had discussed earlier, a lot of it would be them being able to adopt an end-to-end approach to its sustainable strategy. If if the sector is to see its carbon footprint reduced, it's and eventually become zero, right? So there has been a slew of different approaches to sustainability across the industry so far. And I think, sometimes we forget, and again, in today's discussion, we're talking about the film industry, the media consumption and the media distribution, but not forgetting even the larger firms that contribute to the industry, such as consumer electronics. they have been making significant progress to set ambitious carbon neutral and carbon negative targets, right? So I think the film industry, broadcasters, video content creators, we are all driven by association and government-led initiatives. And like you said, this is all of the policies that are in place, but we also now need to begin our sustainable journeys. And I think content providers are becoming a lot more increasingly aware of their growing carbon footprint as internet traffic increases because of digital delivery, as a result of digital delivery, right? So I think at the end of the day, for video to be sustainable, we have to look at that as well. So that's just my point of view. The long answer to a very short question.
That's good. Okay, let's go on with that. As the pinnacle of the high-end video content creation, the broadcasting industry is easily perceived to be the resource-intensive endeavor that creates a high level of waste. So how are they actually, the industry, prioritizing sustainability?
I think, if you look at least from the lens of Malaysia, one of the things, the most immediate action that is quite critical and what people are starting to implement is in the areas of environmental sustainability, right? So, around the areas of waste management, reduce, reuse, recycle, as basic as it sounds, the amount of waste that we create from setting up sets and getting into full-blown productions for broadcast has been pretty insane, right? So I think from an immediate standpoint, that is what they're starting to do. But beyond environmental sustainability, you are starting to see now that, again, it feels bare basics, but it's a start, and it's a good start, where we are also looking at equity within the value chain, right? So when we're looking at people in the workplace, creating content for broadcast, the entire cast, the production, everyone involved, are we at parity with each other? Is everyone given equal opportunity? So a lot of it is happening at the back end to prioritize sustainability, because at the end of the day, stakeholders and shareholders are all looking at it now, and that's become a key priority, because again, what has been drilled into everyone's mindset as you get into the job is, this is not a hashtag, this is not a trend, this is a new way to do business, and we have to do it right. And all your annual reports are now also governed to show what's your sustainability health, right? So I think these are mechanisms that are required for everyone to shift and actually do something about it.
Yeah, it's good to be changed, and sometimes when we do the reporting. Okay, let's look at the mobile communication. It is indeed. Okay, so let's look at the mobile communication technology. Far from being viewed as just another mobile communication technology, the architecture of the 5G networks allows for ultra low latency and higher bandwidth, leading the commercial application, including broadcast television and video distribution, with the lower carbon footprint. Do you think 5G presents opportunities in sustainability, and why does it matter?
I'm really glad that you raised that, because I personally am really excited by the opportunities that 5G presents in the areas of sustainability. I mean, 5G itself is built to work as an energy efficient system, right? And 5G can help to support delivery of AI and IoT software to many industries and locations. And by doing that, 5G has reduced carbon emissions in many other industries like transport, manufacturing, hospitality, agriculture. And we heard earlier on how Chanchal helped us to reframe the carbon emission that we are guilty of in media, that flight from Melbourne to London. So imagine what we could do and what 5G can help us with in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, just by helping us in terms of digital distribution of content, in terms of how we can even create assets and drive better delivery at lower carbon and reduce carbon emissions. I think that's quite an exciting time to be alive, at least in Malaysia this year, as we're all starting to experience 5G.
Yeah, while we are thinking about 5G, actually, China is thinking of working out the 6G now.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we are a little bit slow, but not bad actually, but we're still picking up. Okay, thanks for mentioning Chansha. Okay, question for Chansha. many advertisers are still not yet willing to shift media budgets away from advertising that performs well to those channels that produce low carbon emission. As a result, question remain about whether the industry can find a consistent set of standards that will create clear goals and incentive for rapidly growing decarbonizing of the media supply chain. How has Malaysia launched its transition to a sustainable, decarbonized development path in advertising and media, according to your experience?
I think it links to what you are mentioning as well as what Niz was mentioning, right? So first part of it is the launch of 5G, right? With lower latency, right? Automatically, the optimized delivery and therefore lower emissions will happen. Whether the media owners adopt those methods or not, first thing is if the production of the asset is optimized and which requires lower latency and can be done in a more optimized manner, it automatically delivers lower emissions. So that's the first stage. The other part of it, which is already ongoing and which is a more earlier commitment, is your scope 1 and scope 2, right? Where the commitment is by 2025, which is like what Niz mentioned, the overall improvement in terms of recycling, reuse, and all that. Those things are happening already. The other aspect of it is that obviously because of external pressures as well as their own conscious efforts, corporates are becoming more conscious of these goals as well, right? And not just that, even government is also taking steps in this direction, right? So if you remember in our last budget, 2023 budget, the government actually allocated funds and billions of dollars funds for green startups and for SMEs to reduce carbon emissions, frankly speaking, media platforms and all these come under SMEs. 98% of the business in Malaysia is SMEs, right? So therefore, when the government is also providing that kind of funding and that overall awareness is there, we are already on that path. Of course, we are not nowhere near fruition, right? 100% fruition. That will take time. But we have already embarked on that journey and everyone is doing their part. It is what we need to really do is accelerate it so that we can achieve the 50% goal by 2030, right? That's what is important. And it's not just the measurement and reduction of it, but more importantly, the offsetting of it is also very important, which needs to happen concurrently, right? Now, the other aspect which is very unique to Malaysia is that the maximum in terms of media, the maximum carbon emission happens, as I mentioned during my presentation, through digital ecosystem, right? Advertising in Malaysia on digital platforms is still very, very skewed towards the larger platforms like Google, Facebook, right? Or the likes of Lazada, Shopee, right? Now, these are global organizations who have their own goals of achieving carbon net zero, right? So they have, obviously they are doing their bits and they have started on their journey as well. So if majority of that advertising is happening with these guys, it automatically then starts following the trend, right? So obviously that helps us with the transition on a larger perspective. But from a local publisher angle, yes, we are still behind, I would say. And that's where the government initiatives and the overall push from the industry and industry associations, like Nez mentioned, would be very critical. So while certain SMEs like the production houses and all have already started a lot in terms of scope 1 and scope 2, obviously we need to move more towards scope 3 as well, right? And the larger players in the media industry like TV3 or Media Prima or Astro, they have to definitely embark on this journey faster so that we are from a local ecosystem also we move at pace in this space.
Okay, Chansha, according to your experience, work in Malaysia for many, many years, What has Malaysia's successes up till now? And what are the barriers to further decarbonization across key sectors of the industry?
I think the core success, as I mentioned in my previous response, is and it's partly by default, I would say, is that because digital advertising, which is the largest emission responsible platform, is going through the likes of Google and Meta, and they, being global organizations, are already taking steps in controlling emissions, and they're bound to do that because of their own initiative as well as the global pressures, right? Therefore, it has helped us in that path. I mean, just to give you a data point, about 80% of digital advertising of Malaysia is through Google and Meta. Only 20% goes through local publishers, right? And therefore, automatically, it helps us to be relatively ahead as compared to many other countries in the region where the local ecosystem is much larger, right? And a local digital publisher ecosystem is much larger, and where a lot more needs to be done for them to embark on this zero carbon journey.
All right, since you have traveled to many countries throughout of years of your of your professional life, what can other rapidly industrializing countries learn from Malaysia efforts, according to your observation?
I would say actually both from learn from each other. Both can learn from each other. It's not like only Malaysia can learn from another country or the other country cannot, right? And of course, Australia, for example, has taken some really good strides in the right direction, so we can learn from them. And also the fact that we should not forget one very core point here. You know, developed nations, right, like US, they outsource their manufacturing and services to Asia, right? And then they point finger that Asia is emitting the huge amount of carbon. I mean, all the manufacturing and emission is happening here, so obviously that would happen, right? But it also gives us an opportunity here. You know, if we need to, we need to balance the two, and it also gives us the opportunity to invest in green energy from the very outset. So yes, we are getting a lot of manufacturing for the West happening here, but then we also have the responsibility to start on the green energy route when we are manufacturing or providing services. Then obviously we are really contributing to the greater good.
Okay, thank you, Chansha, for the sharing and also for some of the comment, also some of the view. Okay, question for Dilip. Wow, the media industry consensus is that blunt keyword approaches are antiquated. There has been a little incentive for behavior change without a better alternative. Now, the arrival of the objective standard that can be widely activated and measured against brings new clarity to previously undefined situation. But before the industry can begin to reap the benefits of this new standard, it is essential to pin down the basic in which brands, agency, and ad-supported platforms all play a critical role. As the pressure to further transform one's own organization rises, so too as well do the opportunities to open out new businesses areas and unlock the resulting potential for growth. How can brands amidst and after the COVID-19 pandemic adapt their TV branding strategy to create positive brand equity?
Okay, thank you. Very, I have to think about this, but yeah, actually, I've what I've noticed during the pandemic was that Malaysian brands did adapt, and what do you call it? quite well, I would say. So there was a less emphasis. I was looking at all the ads and how they changed, and there were ads. Of course, they were, the typical. That's where the McDonald ad was, seen as a hypocritical, and there was actually a message from the then Twitter head saying that, this should not be used, the pandemic should not be used as an opportunity to sell. And I think a lot of companies realized that. And what the focus was on was more on a PR or CSR. So companies were actually not selling products directly, or they were actually selling the brand and selling values. So they were showing what they are doing for the society. So, like, they say we support this, or if you see the billboards, we are supporting the first front line, all those, the police, the nurses, the doctors. So that was, I think, companies were responding to, I think, the to that call, that it should not be seen as a opportunity to sell, but rather as a um an opportunity to actually promote their values, core values, and so that they are contributing positively to the society. And I think most companies were able to do that. So they are continuing to do that. I think that was a good selling point. So you can see a lot of companies showing what they contributed, and I think I won't name the brand, but you see there was a brand of air purifiers which were shown, it was in the news everywhere, where they were giving it to hospitals, donating it to the to police and the staff, frontline staff. So you can see that that was it is PR, but PR is part of marketing. And I would say that by doing that, they actually were able to create a positive brand equity. A lot of people who watch those ads, subconsciously, uh, I would say that they had good feelings about the brand. And ultimately, hopefully, I mean, and that's what we learn in in marketing as well, marketing theory, is that will translate to purchases, because you feel good, about a brand.
Okay, Dilip, according to your observation, what is the impact of advertising TV branding purpose inspire action?
uh I had a hard time, thinking to think about this. So what I can say is that, um, even though, I mean, it's controversial, so I do believe that in advertising branding does aspire, has, I mean, all have an objective. So if you look at the model, it depends on what stage of the product launch, or what stage of the marketing campaign, or the company is in it, whether it's just to create awareness, or whether it's to finally make, lead the audience, the consumers, to make a purchase. So there are differences, but I do feel that the companies do have a, what should I say, they do use TV branding, TV advertising and branding to actually uh, inspire consumers. So in the case of SDG, let's say,
Mhm.
I just give you an example. I think best illustrate this is this happened a long time ago, and but it best illustrate how powerful is advertising. And I noticed this several years ago, and I warned my friends in the oil palm industry. So that was when Greenpeace started their campaign, and Greenpeace started their, they targeted Kit Kat, and the campaign was very interesting. So they had a series of videos where they showed, if they followed the tagline of, have a, when you have a Kit Kat, that when you're hungry, you break it off. And what they did was they put in one of the ads, they prepared, uh, the person is hungry, they break it off, and inside is a orangutan's finger, and then the guy bites into it, blood flies. It's quite gory, but did have an impact. Slow but steadily, they carried a number of campaigns. Over time, you see, like, in a few decades, uh, there was a backlash against the oil palm industry. especially in the West. So you can see, especially young people started boycotting oil palm. Ultimately, it translated into, it became bigger and bigger. And you can see at first the industry didn't respond to it. But afterwards, you can see the industry responded. They had to come up with advertising saying that, oh, we use sustainability sourced palm oil. Especially Nestle had to do that, and the governments responded, and you can see the result, right? With the EU, EU decided not to use palm oil for their, for the fuel, biodiesel fuel. So that was, you can see the ultimate, so ultimately, that's advertising. How powerful is advertising can be illustrated from that. It can change a total mindset, turn the people against a product.
Wow, there's another question we're always asking ourselves. Can we trust what we see from advertising? This is okay. Right. Okay. In furtherance of the mention, what you just justified that, what are the obstacles brands encountered while developing and implementing SDG strategies?
There are a number, I would say. First of all, the problem is that companies want to make a profit, right? Unless you are an NGO or a non-profit, so you want to make a profit. And if you look at the definition of business, and capitalism, the earliest ideas about uh, business is that you are there just to make money. But I think this has slowly changed over time. So we are now aware of SDG and talking about sustainability and the triple bottom line. So we got to think about not just about the economic part of it. We also got to think about the environment. We also got to think about all the other stakeholders. So the community. Let's say if you have a factory in the in a jungle. So what are we doing to help the orang asli, for example, right? So yes, the first is, of course, stakeholders want profit, right? So the shareholders, sorry. So now I think that was the main thing. If you want to make a lot of money, uh, the doing all this, SDG strategies is often seen as taking away from the profit, right? That is the biggest obstacle to change the mindset of the shareholders. But once you can convince them that actually being sustainable and being ethical is good for business, and this is what I always teach when I go for workshops as well. Being sustainable, following SDG is actually good for business. Then they see, oh yeah, it can actually translate into more business for you, in fact, and that, I would say, that was the biggest obstacle. But other obstacles, of course, is like, how do you fulfill all this? So do you choose all the 17 SDG goals? Which is impossible. So you got to kind of decide which one do you want to focus on. Is it UN SDG 10, or is it just the environment? So if you're dealing with if you're in real estate, maybe your focus is on labor and on the environment. Probably you can't do like hunger and all, but as many SDGs as you can, right? So yeah, focus on a few first, and then you can actually work on other SDG targets. That would be my answer when I go to when I'm asked this, when I go to companies for consulting. That's what I always tell them. It is good for business, so people see this as an obstacle. That's the problem.
Okay.
Right.
Great. Dilip, right. When you mentioned about SDG in the corporate sector, I think nowadays they pushing the boundary. They're moving to the much more focus is called the ESG. So that's the reason there's a lot of ESG reporting is of course aligned with the sustainability of the alignment. Okay. Let's open out for the public Q&A from the public. I think there is a time to take a look at the questions. I think we have questions here. Right. Let's look at the question. I believe that to realize sustainability in TV branding, requires good coordination and planning. What do you think RTM can do as Malaysian national media to boost more awareness in sustainability? Okay, this is from one of the audience. Anyone want to respond to that?
I could
Chansha,
start
you want to?
first.
Oh yeah, please. Okay, yeah, respond.
Sure. I think that's a really good question, because at the end of the day, it all starts with the policymakers, and one of the biggest policymakers is actually by large the national media platforms such as RTM, right? And I think, in boosting awareness around the subject matter of sustainability, again, it goes back to what is the platform and how do people already consume the platform, because there is no need to sort of shove a very different sort of format or different sort of content type to the audiences for them to understand the SDG perspective. And we need to look at the kinds of content that RTM already develops, whether it's the talk shows or the talk sets or the news platform, something a little bit more serious, to get the point across and the message. But beyond that, I think because they have the, arguably the biggest eyes and ears on the ground when you talk to the grassroots level as well. I think this is where they could do the most in terms of not just getting the message across around sustainability, but coordinating also with the local policy and state leaders to drive the agenda as well, because they have the ears on the ground, the boots on ground, to be able to take that message across and implement it. So I think the coordination piece is key, but it's for RTM to to also work with the local policymakers and the state leaders across the board, nation, west and east coast, to be able to drive this agenda through. That's just my perspective.
Good, gentlemen.
I think just to build on what Nis said, these are larger issues. RTM is just one of the instruments of the government, right? So it's an initiative that government as a whole needs to take, right? As well as within the government, say Ministry of Communications, which is MCMC, will be one of the key stakeholders driving this. And RTM would be potentially one of the instruments that they would use. And in today's day and age, as we know that while we are talking about TV branding here, but TV branding per se is just a platform, right? It can be consumed on various other, like what we are discussing, whether it's CTV, whether it's anything else, addressable TV or whatever it is, right? And therefore, it's important that it should not be just through one RTM like platform, because RTM can play a role, but there needs to be multi-pronged effort so that all these initiatives can reach out to much larger populace rather than limited audiences.
Dilip, any thought?
Yeah, I agree with both the speakers, and I would say right now I don't see much programming talking about sustainability in RTM, and even if they are, it is kind of isolated. I do listen to radio, often Tracks FM when I was like, I do compare between different. I would say that like radio BFM has got more emphasis on, and they talk more about sustainability. So we can benchmark, and see. But there has to be a top-down approach, I think. So it has to come down from the top. They must believe in it first, and and then I think that if there is a policy, I think they can do well. But it must be integrated. So it must not just on television, but because as we know that, as I mentioned, that different segments have different channels that they have visiting now. So maybe across all channels having the same message, but creating awareness that sustainability is not just about environment, but it also includes ending hunger, talking about inequalities and all the other 17 goals, which is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think from the TV station is also based on the background of the viewers. So why RTM created what they create, and also when you mentioned about BFM, of course we need to study the background of the audience as well, because of what kind of audience they're listening to, what kind of station, like radio station or TV station. Like I usually go for BFM because I get what I want from BFM. It's also, for me, it's a self enrichment when I listen to those are the speaker on BFM. But where is others station like radio station or TV station? Sometimes they created the program is catered for that kind of community.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry to say that I'm not a big fan to watch RTM because I don't find what I want, from there. So, but I believe BFN also have their viewership because they created program for specific community, for specific population. So they also get their viewership. So, of course, we need to look at the prospect of the viewer's background. This is my point of view here. Of course, I think along the way, I think all TV station or radio station need to progress further, especially when there's a new phenomenon, especially those are the climate change, sustainability, and even nowadays, people talk about a lot about ESG. So I think it needs to be more enhanced, not just only for so-called the people who get educated, but also the people they are from the rural area. So I think this has to be struck the balance in between that. Of course, this is not me to talk about that also, but it has to take the whole industry to have the common language to to move on, to make it work. Okay. Um, okay, let me see. Is there any more questions? Okay, right. Let's move on to our discussion here. Right. I'm going to go into a bit deeper now for everybody. Let's start from Niswani. Innovation is everywhere. In the CTV and streaming market, creating better viewer experiences and more value for content provider. So, in your view, what does the near-term roadmap look like?
I think, in the near term, what would be exciting to see, actually circling back to what we were discussing before, at least in the perspective of Malaysia, is the introduction of 5G in our implementation of, CTV, of platforms, of broadcast in its very core. Because again, with the power of low latency and its ability to reduce the carbon emissions of industries, I would love to be able to see the makers, the creators, and the planners of everything that we do start to consider this as a way to try and take a leap forward in the space of sustainability. So I think that's something that I'm personally sort of looking at to try and observe and see what the industry is doing with technology now.
Okay, in your current mention, where are the sustainable resources being focused at this point of time?
I see a lot of it now, at least in my purview, being focused around the areas of finding efficiencies through the environmental lens, through waste management, and through digital data and media distribution. I think that's where a lot of resources are being put forth today. It's not wrong, but I do feel that we can actually look at the entire supply chain again and really start turning a corner on every little thing. Early days still, but I think we can do a lot more in the years to come.
Okay, what are the key challenges being addressed here? I think the most important, what does all the SDG mean the CTV market will look like in 2 to 3 years?
I would love to assume that, with all of the information that we have today on the importance of sustainability, whether it's environmental, whether it's cultural or societal, and knowing where our audience is and where they are going. I mean, Chanchal just touched on it a little bit, and it's very true in that our consumers today don't just buy or consume a certain platform just because it's the biggest. They buy and consume a certain platform or specific content because they're doing something big and they have a purpose-driven mission that aligns with the audience. Putting all of these things together, I do hope and expect that the CTV market will be one that is a lot more proactive in creating very customized, personalized content that is more relatable to each audience set in the space of sustainability, so that it's not just about pushing and shoving messaging for me to accept, but it's things that I would find value for. And beyond that, I think technology and innovation in the next 2-3 years should allow us, again, in the age of second screen and double and multitasking or multi-screening, it should allow us the opportunity to not just be able to learn and be educated, but to immediately take action. So what can I do with this information that I have as a consumer, right? Now that I've been exposed to something really thought-provoking or educational on a CTV platform. What can I do with this information now? I'm suddenly aware and I want to take action. A lot of times we find people are inspired, but that energy is diffused or that fire is doused because they don't know what to do with this. What can I do with this fire that I've got burning in me? So I'd love to imagine a world 2-3 years from now where innovation allows us to take immediate action, sign up for something, pledge for something, do something, I think that immediate action is key. Again, using the power of media and second screening and multi-screening, I'm sure we can do so many more things.
Thank you, Niswani. Chansha, advertising and media are a complex industry, which means that the only way to initiate sustainable change and achieve true net zero is through collective action and collaboration to concern what it will take for the industry to come together and being driving positive change and what companies can do today to get started. So the climate emergency affects each and every one of us. What role can the industry play in driving positive change?
I think I briefly mentioned that, and you as well. That's where I think Add Net Zero also comes in, right? Because it brings the industry together towards a common goal, right? And it spans across the different scopes. It's not just limited to, like what Nis said, only carbon emission reduction, but a broader scope of scope 1, 2, and 3, everything. So that's where Add Net Zero comes into play. And as I mentioned, one of the actions that Add Net Zero even goes down to is smaller steps of even, say, awards and events. It's not just limited to broader stuff, but even actual actions that can be taken. So that's where I think we need Add Net Zero to proactively get in all the industry players together, starting with, of course, one common measurement starting point, because everyone needs to have that first, so that we are able to measure ourselves against a base, right? And how we are improving. Otherwise, it will be in the air. Everything will be in the air. We are doing this, we are doing that, but we don't know whether we are actually making any difference or not. So if we have one common measurement from where we start off, and then we take those actions as per the actions of Add Net Zero has thing, and probably we can, as we go along, we can expand on that as well, and not just limit it to those 5 actions, right? And evolve and measure each of it, and obviously reduce and offset at each stage. That's what all the industry needs to come together to do.
Okay, Chansha, I take it further of what you just mentioned about net zero. Emerging regulation are really increasing the urgency for the industry to promote sustainability. What do you think? And does net zero think that it will take to get to real net zero?
So real net zero will start from individuals, right? And not just corporates, right? Corporates have a role to play, but even more importantly, individuals. So even within a corporate, while corporate, for example, a very simple example would be recycle, reuse, right? A corporate can make that as an initiative, but to achieve that net zero, individuals have to act on it. So I think corporates will take initiatives, but individuals will have to act on it, right? So that's one part. Then that's why I said that Add Net Zero is taking certain actions, which are right now limited to 5 actions, right? Which I mentioned during my presentation as well. But moving forward, I think it would evolve and it would start adding other aspects of it, like what Professor Dilip mentioned, right? That there are 17 elements to it, and it's not just limited to climate. It has a much broader scope. And But for each one of it, besides the industry, I think it's individual responsibility as consumers, as participants, as individuals, for each one of us to act and do our own bits. Only then the true net zero can be achieved.
Okay, thank you, Chansha. Dilip, YouTube's increase important as part of the TV marketing mix.
Yeah.
Obviously, the world of the TV is more fragmented and evolving faster than ever before. The advanced TV space to show marketers just how to move TV forward, with everything from moving from GRP, which is gross rating point, to CPM, cost per mils, and audience-based buying to multi-screen TV and achieving optimal deduplicated reach and frequency to data and outcome measurement never before possible. What do brands need to do to play a role in this environment according to your findings?
Just going back to my lecture, I always say you have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So you got to really believe in it. So I have had companies which we are required. I've gone to companies and when I talk to them, they are required to have the ESG and what they're doing for sustainability because it's now part of the requirement, government requirement for the listing, right? And they see all this being transparent, and they see that as a hurdle or unnecessary. But they have to realize that it is the consumers who are demanding. It is the consumers who want this to happen, and the voice is getting stronger and stronger, and especially the younger generation. So if you the millennials, the Z Gen, uh, as compared to us, the X generation, they want that they are looking for brands which are which are not just greenwashing or whitewashing or all the washing, but they actually mean what they say. They're doing it. So so the values of for example ethical values, the diversity, the talking about sustainable values must be part and parcel of the values of the company. So companies, I can recall when one of the few that it was Body Shop, and then later ASOS, and others were just followers, and but companies, people can see through now, and because of social media, I would say, it's becoming very, very transparent. You can't hide anymore, even. So if you are not following what you call, you say you are green, you say you are sustainable, but if you're not, it will come out sooner than later. So I think they companies have no choice. Literally, it's not just because of government rules, but you should do it because it is what the consumer demands now. And
Okay. Okay, right. Thank you. This is for all. TV branding and advertising has typically been out of reach for smaller companies with limited media budgets. But CTV is leveling the playing field for SMBs, which is the small and medium-sized business. Small agency and emerging brands, they are able to take advantage to new cost-effective opportunities to reach their audiences with entertaining video ads on the larger living room screen at a fraction of what a linear TV campaign would cost. What has CTV become a true performance channel for SMBs?
Yes.
How
so-
can CT and
Oh,
also
yeah, go ahead.
and also the following also the follow-up question: how can CTV be used to complement with SDG strategy in the age of streaming? Anyone?
So I think for the first part of the question, what you're saying is right because it was linear TV was obviously prohibitive from two aspects, right? For the SMBs, one, the entry cost of creating a television commercial, which is very expensive. That was the number one. Number two was that if their business is, for example, limited to Klang Valley, why do they need to waste their resources in advertising nationally? Because linear TV, you can only advertise nationally, right? So therefore, CTV is providing them what they were not getting, and they had to therefore live with, say, non-audio-visual communication. So they used to use print, or they used to use out of home or radio, which was not audio-visual. And we all know that the impact of audio-visual combined is much greater than just audio or just visual, right? So CTV is providing them with that opportunity now, because you can be, as Niz mentioned, very sharply targeted, right? And the cost of entry in terms of creating the communication is also much more reasonable, right? I mean, you have to create a video which can be easily created for much lesser cost. So that definitely provides them with that ability to use that as a platform for themselves. Second thing is, because it is CTV is addressable, right? So it can be specific areas or specific regions, right? And therefore it can also sort of indirectly as well as directly measure the impact of what they are communicating. So for example, I'm saying, if you have a eatery shop, a restaurant, and you want to advertise in Klang Valley, or in even smaller area like Bangsa, Ardamansara and all, and you use CTV, you can potentially measure that how your advertising is therefore driving footfall to your restaurant, right? So it is a direct performance measurement, right? So it definitely can help you with that. And how it can be used to complement with the SDG strategy is, again, I mean, you by not creating a full-blown television commercial, which, like Niz mentioned, how much of the overall supply chain impact of on environment it creates. If you're creating a video ad, which is much lesser from that perspective, as well as you can create a lighter version, which therefore, in terms of even the digital impression or footprint perspective, is more efficient in terms of lower carbon emissions. It obviously complements the SDG strategy as well, right?
Okay. Thank you, Chansha. What about others? What are your thoughts?
I agree with what Chanchal says, actually. I wouldn't build more from that. Completely supportive.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
With you.
Okay, great. Okay, let's look at the questions a little bit more, which is milder. Okay, more towards to another side of the perspective. Let's look at the humanity thought before we conclude the panel discussion today. What does that mean for us as a culture? We are all looking at ourselves as brands, TV show as brand. What does it mean to attach and align ourselves to a brand?
I think as a culture, it's sort of the chicken and egg, right? I mean, we look to ourselves and we look to what platforms, TV, culture is telling us to be and how we behave. But at the same time, I do feel that whatever we put to the world as producers, as makers and creators, does have the power to influence and impact culture too. So, I think it's one and the same. And when we want to create content, I think that's where we need to think about the responsibility that we have, whether broadcast, whether connected TV, to know what is the messaging that we're putting out there that would make a measurable positive impact to communities and societies and individuals. Because it's so easy for us to create content just for the sake of entertainment and for the sake of ratings or viewership, that it doesn't have anything that is worth any form of integrity when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to humanity, and how we should conduct ourselves with and amongst each other, right? So I think when we look to ourselves as brands and TV shows as brands, more and more, I think the responsibility is even greater to all of these content providers and content creators to make content that they know will make a measurable positive impact to culture and people around us.
Okay, gentlemen.
I think I'll just say a simple, very well-known fact, right? We always used to say, and we all know, that cinema is a reflection of the society that we live in, right? We always used to say that. But on the reverse of it, like Nis said, cinema also creates a huge influence on the society. It's not just a reflection of society, but if you keep on making a certain genre of cinema, the society also starts becoming like that. So content has that power, and therefore, with that power comes a responsibility, right? So therefore, it is extremely important how we use it and how we build cultures with that.
Content is power. Chansha, thank you. Okay, Dilip, any final thought on that?
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, in my class, even though I teach marketing, and I always tell, the power, amazing power that we have in as marketers, and the power to influence people. The power to influence people is actually, and it's true. And if some people don't believe it, and they say, "Oh no, you can't." I'm educated, but as we have seen, it is still controversial. There was the Cambridge Analytical scandal, which is under study now. Which convinced people to vote for a certain group, or a certain politician, right? So you can
Yeah.
see the immense power of advertising and convincing people. So yeah, aligning with the right brand is very important, but and actually, and also, the brands, I think I would say media channels, they have a huge responsibility. And I think we as academics, I talk from academic point of view, I would say that we have a role to play as well. And actually, you know make my student at least aware of what is. That's why when I always tell, the ugly, the good, the bad, the ugly. So we
Mm.
have to show that, yes, advertisement, the advertising industry has been accused in the past of uh, sometimes showing things which which is not real. That is a big, but I will always say that, marketing. So because, for example, when I tell us I'm teaching marketing, the answer I get from people is, "Oh, so you teach people how to lie?" That is the perception, right? Advertising is lying. So I tell them, no, 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 that's totally opposite of what advertising is and what marketing is. So we the but then
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
message. That's the message I always tell. No, that's completely wrong. That's completely wrong. Okay. And yeah, but I do we have a role as academics, as yeah, we do follow brands, right? We do follow. People are very brand loyal. They are
Mhm.
you can see some people stick with one cigarette brand, the rest of their life. So you can see
Mhm.
how loyal people are to some
Mm.
certain clothing brands. You talk bad about Apple, you can lose a friend. You see? So so how loyal people are. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned about this marketing, how you see advertising marketing, whether can we believe in what can we believe in what we see? What is really depends of the interpretation, and also how much are we informed enough to understand the
Yeah.
surrounding, and also the maker, which is the producer of the advertisement, and the marketing, which is a marketer. They also need to take the ethic to produce what they do, to which is infused to the public. Sometimes it takes two to tango. So there's no way by saying that should be blamed by certain party. I think this is not the way it should be. So, but it's the ethic of the producer and also the interpretation of the viewer. So it takes two to tango. Of course, it said a lot just now. You mentioned about this, how we using marketing creatively by using this as a tunnel to promote to the masses. I think the state election can see that can it say a lot from there. So this is one of the example I can refer to. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to thank all the esteemed panels. Indeed, a wonderful audience who clearly tunes in and posed a great question earlier on. I think I'm going to summarize the conversation. So despite the discussion on making SDGs actionable, we are living in the golden and perhaps platinum age of television with more content available than ever before. the element of consumer discovery that may happen for a CPG brand, which is a consumer packaged goods, once in a lifetime happens much more frequently in the content world. Consumers are exposed to the new content daily, from linear television and streaming services to short form, which is the panels has just mentioned that. That said, deciding what to watch can be complicated. This is where branding plays a huge role in simplifying the process. Logo placement on screen is one important way television brands help their audience make informed decisions, according to Dilip mentioned that. The TV and video market is highly dynamic and is characterized by a great number of drivers. Digitalization, new market offers, and disruption by digital players ensure rapid change. Moreover, consumer expectation and usage habits are changing rapidly in the age of the video on demand and mobile media consumptions. To date, many brands have been doing their part to make their business more sustainable for the planet and consumers, such as innovating packaging to reduce waste and or producing carbon neutral products. While there are many challenges marketers are facing in 2023, sustainability can't be deprioritized in planning discussion, as TV branding look to make an incremental impact on becoming more sustainable. It is important to focus on the efficiency as a pathway to achieve this. Efficiency can take multiple approaches. For instance, be more intentionally defining audience engagement and insights, elevating the quality of the creative assets, and optimizing campaigns while agile analytics to see how they can perform better. Efforts like this and more are within reach. It's up to us in the industry to lead by example and take steps authentically, both big and small, to reduce emission. According to Peter Drucker, as Peter Drucker stated, we can't manage what we can't measure. When you have the tools to better understand your audience need, goals, and how to achieve results with greater efficiency and sustainability, you can better serve customer and the planet in the long run. With that, thank you so much to Ms. Niswani Shaha, former Vice President, the 4H Malaysia Association of Accredited Advertising Agents Malaysia, and also ex-Chief Executive, Ogilvy Malaysia. Thank you, Niswani. Niswani, thank you. Okay. And also, thank you so much to Mr. Chansha Chakrabarti, Chief Executive Officer of Group M Malaysia, and also a council member of Media Specialists Association, MSA Malaysia. Thank you, Chansha.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Right. And also, thank you so much to Dr. Dilip Mutun, Professor of Marketing and also Head of Digital Transformation Research Cluster, School of Business, Monash University, Malaysia campus. Thank you, Dilip.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Okay, for this insightful discussion, we have come to the end to this session. Panelists, it is absolute my honor as well as the privilege to have you all here, and also the few people at the background, the student services team who has done an excellent job. So thank you so much to all. Okay, this is for everyone, and so thank you and grateful for you to make time for this, and for you know everyone to just fought and do this work. And thank you all. Take care yourself. Take time when you are exhausted, when things happen that you didn't expect. So thank you all. ISUC Plaza series organized by Integrated Sustainability and Urban Creativity Center from Asia Pacific University of Technology and Innovation, APU. Till then, take care and each other. Have a wonderful evening. I see you soon. And for the Malaysian audience, happy National Day.